Here we are again talking about every lawyer's favourite term, commercial awareness. Now before I start, I want you to excuse my nails. They've been through better. Now back to what we were actually supposed to be talking about. Something that used to crop up for me time and time again when I was rejected from law firms was that I was not displaying enough commercial awareness. And I remember feeling quite frustrated because I don't think I really kind of understood how I could improve it further other than just watching and reading the news. However, I soon realised that revising BBC News the day before the interview, or actually on the train to the interview, is probably not the best way to show that you have a consistent commercial awareness. And if you have watched my content before, you will know that one thing that I talk about as a tip for improving your commercial awareness is to keep a commercial awareness journal. Now when I started using some form of makeshift journal, it was actually just a notebook where I just jotted down my thoughts. I realised that when I was in interviews, I was able to talk about news stories with a lot more clarity and a lot more knowledge, and I was able to link my current story that I was talking to another story. This is because I was able to track how stories developed over time, and I was able to form links between one news story and another news story, which then became an interesting discussion point in interviews. Now in this video, I want to show you something that I've come across, and I'm so happy to announce that they are sponsoring this video. Is a commercial awareness journal created by the Lawyer Spot in collaboration with Little Law. You can pre-order this journal right now via the link in the description box below and also the pinned comment. However, what I'm going to do is, rather than explain to you the pros and benefits of this book, which are very clear to me on the onset, I actually want to show you how I would use this journal, and also show you how you can use it as well before you buy. So in order to show you how I would use this journal, I'm actually going to analyse a news article in real time right now. But before I start, let me show you the two things that the Lawyer Spot have provided to me. So the first thing is this memo sheet almost. It's like a cheat sheet, and it basically explains how to use the commercial awareness journal. And on the back of the paper here, it has a 4-section summary of how to use a book, and I found this so useful. Then the next thing that I was provided was the actual commercial awareness journal itself. I can tell straight away, luxury, just the feel of the paper, it's elite. The pages are thick, and also inside you can see that there are 5 sections. One is the headline, then there's a section called Looking Out, a section called Looking In, a section called Law Firm Involvement, and then a place to put your notes in. So I will be using this in the video today and showing how I can analyse a particular news story. Now this news story in question is actually in relation to something that's a hot topic right now, and it's about sustainability. So I saw an article from The Guardian, and it was published on the 2nd of September 2020, and the headline of the article is Selfridges wants half of transactions to be resale, repair, rental or refills by 2030. So essentially what Selfridges are trying to do is become a lot more sustainable in their practice and encourage customers to not only buy their products but buy from second hand, go to their shops to repair products, resell their products and rent out products as well. So they are really trying to take on this more sustainable practice, and they have got this ambitious target of half of their interactions with customers to be around this sustainable motive in 10 years time. Oh no wait, 8 years time. My brain is actually still processing that I'm in 2020. It's really bad. Now a little bit of background about Selfridges that I kind of knew already before delving into all of this. There was a buyout with Selfridges, I think around 2021, I think it was late 2021. The Selfridges was primarily owned and originally owned by this family called the Weston family, and they then sold Selfridges for I think around $4 billion to this Thai property development company. Don't quote me on that though, I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head. I just remember the figure 4 billion because that is a lot of money. The article also refers to this as well and says the new owners are very happy about the fact that Selfridges are adopting this more greener initiative. So we've got the headline here. The next thing we want to look at is the next section in the journal, which is Looking Out. Now if we look at the handy guide and cheat sheet that has been provided, Looking Out is a section where you want to look at the external factors that are being indicated in the story called macro factors. A good prompt for this section is to think about pestle factors. These are political, economic, social, technological, legal or regulatory, and environmental. So I've talked a little bit about pestle in previous videos as well. So hopefully if this is something that you're not aware of and you don't know what pestle is, just feel free to click on that video where hopefully I'll show it on either side of me. So I'm going to adopt the same pestle technique here for this story about Selfridges. So if we look at political first, I think one thing that comes to my mind straight away is that the government has announced a new net zero target by 2050, and there is now becoming increasing pressure on companies, regardless of size, to contribute and help fulfill this net zero target. And I think one of the ways in which Selfridges is doing that and is trying to show consumers, the government, everyone that they're doing this is through this new initiative and goal that they've set for themselves. There may also have been some political factors that governed Selfridges' decision to set this target by 2030 as well, because maybe they wanted to look like they were the leaders in the retail industry. There may even be future regulations that Selfridges may have to abide by, so maybe this initiative and target that they've set sets them ahead of the curve and helps preempt any future regulations. For example, I had a look on the government website and there was a section on there that stated that if there are particular markets that are failing to help achieve this net zero target, then regulation may be necessary. And I think it's fair to say that the retail industry, with the rise of fast fashion, isn't necessarily the most sustainable practice out there, and we could predict some more sustainable regulations being enforced on retailers in the future. So potentially Selfridges is trying to say, look, we've got this target here, we're ahead of the curve, look at us. Now the next section is economic, and I'm not going to lie, this is the one that I personally struggle with the most in terms of thinking of what to say. So if you've got any better solutions, please do comment it in the comments below. One thing that came to my mind straight away from an economical factor for Selfridges to think about is the fact that when you do become more sustainable as a business, inevitably it will cost you more. So for example, on the article, one thing that they've mentioned is that they are now going to offer repair services outside of London. This can mean increasing costs for Selfridges in terms of delivering products outside of London and really, I guess, opening up that service and making it more accessible to those outside of London. There are obvious costs there involved. However, I'm sure Selfridges have probably managed to balance this out with expenses and revenue elsewhere as well. So I guess that kind of balances the scales a little bit. Another economical factor to consider is competition with other retailers, which I've talked about briefly, with competition with other high-end retailers like House of Fraser, for example. And also another economic factor that may have pushed Selfridges to do this is the increasing popularity of sites like Depop. So one thing that Selfridges may be doing is really monitoring how Depop do their business, what their strategy is. Social, I think that was quite easy for me to think about, and it's quite fair to say that definitely amongst the younger generation, we are a lot more likely to buy products or engage in services from a particular business because their practices are more sustainable or ethical. So I think that's a social perspective, and I think it's clear to say in the article as well, it also states that due to increasing demand, Selfridges have set this target. So I think it's also Selfridges have acknowledged that they are responding to increasing pressure to become more sustainable. I think it's also clear, I think on the front of Selfridges, it has that whole yellow slogan at the moment about be the change or something. And I do remember vaguely on Twitter that having some backlash because it was like, well, are you actually doing anything to change? So potentially Selfridges is responding to that pressure as well. I mean, for example, look at brands like Pretty Little Thing, for example. Pretty Little Thing have recently launched Pretty Little Thing Marketplace, and albeit at first this may look like a really good scheme, I think, for me, I think it's a push in the right direction. PLT have also been accused of greenwashing, which I also see as equally fair. PLT doesn't necessarily have the best ethical practices in place anyway, and what greenwashing essentially means is when it's clear to people that businesses are using sustainability as almost a tick box challenge and do not actually care about initiating and undertaking green practices. So essentially the reason why they adopt these sustainable practices is because it's performative, and that's what PLT have been accused of, and I'm not surprised that they have, if I'm honest with you. And in this situation, Selfridges, from a social perspective, is probably wanting to avoid that kind of same backlash. And that's why I think they've adopted a strategy, they've adopted targets and goals and publicised that to individuals. Technological is also an important factor for Selfridges to consider in this news story. There is a mention in the article that they are looking to make repairs and booking repairs easier online. So I think that element is definitely something where IT teams have been involved. Website designers, for example, have had to be involved to ensure that that process is as efficient as possible. And I think one thing about consumers, including myself, is that we have such a short attention span. So albeit we want to be more green and more sustainable, sometimes we are prevented from doing so because it's not easy to do so and it's not instant. So I think that's one thing that Selfridges is definitely trying to tackle with the technology here. And also they may want to develop more technology in the future that allows for easier rental of products and easier resale of products and easy repair of products as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is anything in the future that shows that Selfridges have invested in some new technology that allows them to do this. Now legal, I think this was one that was pretty clear to me, and I think one thing that legal and law firms have been doing more often is setting up their own ESG practices and teams within the firm itself. Some of the in-house counsel in Selfridges may have a spot in the board of directors and take part in board meetings, and I have read about how in-house legal teams are almost spearheading ESG related initiatives in companies, and this may have been the case here with Selfridges as well. So if you're an in-house lawyer and you are advising your sole client, which is the business that you are operating in, one of the things that lawyers are becoming more and more aware to is how to make their business more strategic from an ESG perspective. And I'm pretty sure that's been the case here with Selfridges as well. There may also be the case where Selfridges are entering into agreements with third parties. So for example, parties that offer reselling abilities or parties that are able to repair trainers, for example. So entering into those agreements with those suppliers and those people who provide those services is also something that legal teams have had to be involved in. And also just looking at the legal implications of Selfridges doing this in the first place, it kind of links to political, in that I think Selfridges are pre-acting that in the future there will probably be future regulations regarding sustainability in the retail sector in which the Selfridges can say that we are already responding to this. So for them, I think it may be about being reactive rather than proactive. Now the next and final section of the PESTLE section is environmental, and I think I've been talking about the environment and sustainability for most of this video, so I think that bit is pretty obvious. Selfridges have adopted an initiative and a target that allows them to reach a new goal of half the interactions with consumers being in relation to their reselling, repairing, renting business. So essentially in this situation there is increasing demand on companies to become a lot more environmentally friendly and adopt more sustainable practices, and Selfridges is trying to prove that they are doing exactly that. Now let's move on to the third section, which is about looking in, and it's essentially placing yourself in the shoes of a person working in the organisation. So for example, a director or the CEO, and you're essentially thinking about internal factors. So the example is given here. The thing you might want to look at is revenue, profitability, competition, employee well-being, reputation and brand, and so on. So with this story in mind with Selfridges, there's a few that I've pointed out and I've thought about, which are not wanting to be accused of greenwashing or have reputational damage, which companies like PLT have had after announcing a sustainable practice. I'm sure as a CEO or director, I would also be monitoring the competition very fiercely. Companies like Depop and, for example, that I've already mentioned, or other reselling companies like Vinted that are increasing in popularity as well. I would look at new technology, so potentially work with consultants that provide technology in the retail sphere and allow them to advise the business on new strategies to allow us to accomplish that goal. I think it's also important as a CEO or director to ensure that there is a means in place to, I guess, checkpoint that we are actually meeting and on the road to meet that target in 2030, because it would be a bit embarrassing if we weren't able to do that. Having potentially another team, that's an employment perspective, of hiring a new team or new people who are solely focused on ensuring that Selfridges are reaching their target. I think it's also important that there is a means, like I mentioned, like a checkpoint. So every year there's an evaluation of how close Selfridges is to achieving this target, what's going well, what's not, and evaluating that so that that target is able to be reached by 2030. in-house counsel to make sure to look out for governmental regulations and ensure that we are kept up to date on the new sustainable regulations that the government may be enforcing. And as a director or CEO, I may also be looking to build new relationships with other suppliers and third parties. So attending networking events or relying on other professionals in the business to be introduced to you, so you are able to bring in fresh ideas and work with new people, both within Selfridges and outside. So the last section is about law firm involvement. So it's essentially talking about how a law firm that has potentially been instructed would engage in the issues that have arisen from the story. Now there's a few that I've thought about here. Of course, there are environmental lawyers that may be involved here. The firm's sole ESG practices that they have, standalone ESG practices that they have, could also be involved here. Commercial teams may be involved in procuring contracts and agreements with other third parties like reseller companies or companies that repair trainers, for example. Lawyers could be involved in hosting workshops and training on how to be more sustainable and how to actually reach that goal by 2030. That's more of a business development perspective, so BD could also be involved there alongside lawyers as well. So in interviews, it's important to think about, not only from a lawyer's perspective, but literally everyone in the firm, how can they be involved in this particular story with the client. And the last thing that I thought of, there's probably loads more teams out there that could assist with this, but IP as well. So say if Selfridges wanted to trademark a particular name that is the brand name for their reselling, repairing. I'm not sure if they've done this already, it's just something that I've thought of. They may look to IP lawyers for that to be trademarked. So that's another way in which Selfridges may engage a law firm in that way. I really hope you have enjoyed this video. I really love the Commercial Awareness Journal. I think it's great. I think Little Law are a great company. They are reputable. They've been providing commercial awareness, and they even helped me when I was applying for training contracts years ago. So I think they are great. I think LawyerSpot is great. This is a great quality product. And again, if you would like to pre-order your journal, please feel free to click on the link below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.